and welcome to a special live episode of the Present Poetry Podcast. Today, we are interviewing Tristan Buttigieg. Tristan Buttigieg is a passionate poet, musician, singer-songwriter, and artist. His debut poetry collection, Have Nine Lives, explored the complexities of the human experience. In his follow-up collection, Pearlesque, Buttigieg delves deeper into themes of love, hope, loss, resilience, transformation, and self-discovery. With lyrical verses that blend beauty and raw emotion, Pearlesque invites readers on a journey of reflection and healing. As a multifaceted artist, Buttigieg's work spans poetry, music, and visual art, reflecting his belief in the transformative power of creative expression. Central to his vision is the idea that art is open to interpretation, encouraging readers to bring their unique perspectives to his work. Tristan has been interviewed and mentioned in various media outlets, including the Bucks County Herald, 89.7 WDBR, and numerous podcasts, where his work has been celebrated for its emotional depth and creative authenticity. He has also performed his music and poetry across the Doylestown, New Hope, and Philadelphia areas, captivating audiences with his distinctive blend of genres and heartfelt performances. And we are honored to have him here on the Present Poetry Podcast. So thank you for joining us, Tristan.
No, honor to be here. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it.
So I want to ask you the question that I ask all of my poets that I interview.
Mhm.
How did you get into poetry?
Well, that's definitely something that there's two versions of that. There's a long version and a short version. So I'm going to give you the short version because I know we're a little short on time. But so the short version is that the poetry and the writing have always been correlated with music, always been connected. And when I was very young, my parents have a clothing business in the rock and roll industry.
Mm-hmm.
So they were very involved in the rock and roll industry and things like that. So I've always been immersed in that world. And there was a point where I got a little older, and they said that okay, we need to get Tristan some classic rock CDs and a
Okay.
boombox. Okay, so they bought me the traditional ones. People like Kiss, Queen, AC/DC, and people like that, or
All the
bands like
classics.
that, all the classics. And I was like, immediately, I wanted to be like these bands. These bands took my breath away. And again, like I say, the music definitely correlates with the writing. When I was very young, I've always loved writing. Writing was always a subject that I enjoyed in school, and it was always something that I just enjoyed doing in general. I love writing stories and all that kind of stuff. But continue with the music. So, again, wanted to be like these guys. And there came a point where um, people around me was like, we better buy this kid a guitar. Because if we don't, like, this kid's gonna go insane. If we don't get him a guitar. So I got a guitar when I was about, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, and I just started teaching it myself. I had no means or motivation to go to a teacher and teach, learn it that way. I wanted to learn it by myself. Um, Came some roadblocks with that, though. Of course, when you don't have an instructor with that. Um, there was a point where I was having trouble with chords, and you know, to all your music listeners who do play music, if there is any, um, that might seem the easiest part of learning to play guitar, but that was the most difficult part for me.
The
Okay,
chords.
and there came to a point where I just wanted to drop the whole thing, and I gave up on it. So what do I do? Out of frustration, I watch a show, and there was a guy who brought in a framed photo of Jimi Hendrix.
Okay.
Now, I was still interested in listening to music. I didn't want to play music. I like to listen though. So I was listening to him a little bit, and I was so instantly hooked. And he did something so different than what these bands I listed before. Again, I praise them,
Right.
you know, but he did something so different for me. And not only that, he opened up my horizons and expanded my musical and writing influences from that. Okay, just by listening to one song opened up the doorway to my many influences. You have people like Jim Morrison, okay, also from that same time in the 60s. You
Right.
have Jim Morrison. You have the Beat Poets who came a little bit before. You have Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, William Burroughs, people like that. And, there's also people like, Scott Walker, David Sylvian, who are also very immersed in their music and poetry. And Bob
Hmm.
Dylan's a big one too. So not only was that a gateway to new music and new experiences, but it was a new gateway to these poets who were combining their poetry with music. And that's how my first poem in my debut book, the first poem on the book is inspired by a Dylan poem because I was writing for many years, like I said, and I just wasn't happy with the way it was looking. And I heard Subterranean Homesick Blues one day by Bob Dylan.
Okay.
And if you want to call it possession, call it what you want. Writers can tend to be very spiritual at times. But I feel that I was swayed and possessed in a sense, and I just started writing without no hesitation, without stopping at all. And that's where the first poem came from. And I was like, okay, I really like the theme. I like the style. I like the way it looks. So
Hmm.
that's how that whole journey came about. But it took a it took a while.
Right. And these journeys, these creative journeys, they do tend to take a little bit.
Yeah,
I liked what you said about how writers being spiritual, and I think that's very true, especially for poets, because poets we tend to see things below the surface a little bit, and we like to extract meaning from things that other people would just dismiss.
exactly,
I
exactly.
agree with you 100% on that. And I also agree that music is very much a part of poetry. Like poetry and music go hand in hand, in my opinion. Do you feel like your music also is heavily influenced by these? Are you trying to find your own sound?
Definitely in the beginning when you do have your idols, you definitely do want to sound like your idols for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But that was another lesson that these my heroes have taught me is that, you know, they they didn't make their music, and this is just my interpretation. Someone else might interpret it a different way, but my interpretation was they didn't make this music so you can sound like them. They made their music so you can find your own individual voice and sound. Okay. And
Okay.
that I find to be a very important lesson. And that is actually the basis of of the book, which I want to convey in the book that, you know, everybody has their voice, everybody has their opinions of life and what things mean. And I want to hear that. And you hear a lot of times where poetry, there's a lot of wonderful poetry that has a definitive meaning, but I find that the poetry that has is can't think of the word right now, but has one or two more meanings,
Mm-hmm.
because there's things in life are not definite. And I definitely do feel that the poetry kind of reflects on that, but it makes you think. And if two people are discussing what it could mean, like someone thinks this, someone thinks that, you know, there's no need for hostility. You think the way you think, and you can have a good discussion about it. I think having discussion and thinking about it is great and healthy for people.
It
Yeah.
sounds like you don't want to put your poetry in a box. You said that
No,
they
no.
have like some poems do have the meanings that they're supposed to have, but you want to go outside that. You want people to find their own meanings.
Yeah, no, I don't want any kind of pigeonholing on my end. It's just, whatever comes to you is what, is acceptable. Yeah.
Now, with that being said, do you have specific meaning attached to your poems? Or do you also like look at one and think, okay, it means this, and then come back to it later and think, oh, it might actually mean this?
Well, yeah, no, it's interesting because even someone who wrote the poem, you always get a new meaning. You always get a new feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
And like one. That's funny. Like a couple days ago, I was reading one of my poems, and I was like, "Wow, this is like very different than what I imagined it sound was going to sound like." And
Mm-hmm.
like a couple days later, it sounds entirely different. You know, and that's also the kind of vibe I want to get, which is also where these musical influences come from. We're going to take Jimi Hendrix, for example. In my opinion, when you listen to one of his songs, you can listen to the same song over and over again. There is a different sound, a different approach to that. If you really listen, if you're really attentive, there's a different approach to every time he plays the same song. And variety is the spice of life. So that's what I'm trying to portray in the poetry to make it so that people think differently. They might have a different opinion when they read it, before and after. So definitely different interpretations for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I do like that poetry is very versatile in that the interpretations can change based on time, based on experiences, because even some of those poems that we know were supposed to mean one thing, looking at it from a modern perspective, it could mean something completely different now, despite
Exactly.
what the
Yeah.
author wanted.
Exactly. I mean, societies change, people change. Yeah, like you said, something that might have been from the past, could
A
mean
person
something
that
very
has
different.
experienced this event might not understand from a person that experiences this event.
Exactly. Right. So,
It's
you
very
know,
much a perspective thing.
yes,
Agreed.
very much so. Yeah.
And I like that in poetry personally. And I'm very much of a similar vein. Like I like my poems to have more than one meaning to them, or at least the potential for more than one meaning to them. Um,
Right. Mhm.
so with your first book, how did you decide it was time to collect them all together?
Well, again, definitely when I wrote, it's funny, I didn't mention the title of the poem. So the first poem that was inspired by the Dylan song, Line Up the Animals. Um, Again, I've been writing for so long, many years. I've been writing poetry, and it just wasn't jiving. But then I wrote this, and I was like, you know what? This style is me,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Because although I'm based in Philadelphia, I've been based in Philadelphia for a long time. But originally, I'm from Manhattan, I'm from New York City on the Upper East Side. And again, growing up in that rock star, rock and roll, city, grungy kind of,
Mm-hmm.
environment, that cool kind of city environment, I've always wanted the poetry to portray that. I've always wanted it to come off as like this kind of city-ish kind of poetry, right?
Okay.
And again, years of writing never really jibed. But then when I saw this, I was like, okay, I gotta do something with this. I have to, because something's telling me like this is the way you should present your poetry in your book and in general. So that's how it kind of spawned from that, just from that one poem. And the whole book is a continuation of, and each poem shows a continuation of the skill sets that are obtained and learned while I'm still perfecting this craft. So it's almost like a timeline in a way.
A timeline. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So the readers can journey with you through your poetry experience.
Exactly. Yeah. And people can take the ride in the experience if they do wish to. Yeah. So it's definitely a timeline of my perfecting my skills as a poet and perfecting my skills as a poet that I portray and I want to be like. So yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And since it is very lyrical, I'm assuming you do a lot of free form poetry, or do you like to stick to forms?
I definitely do stick to the very free form, freestyle kind of form. In the book, there is some haikus that are scattered in there. Um, there was a point where I was just so fascinated with haikus, and it kind of aligned, and I'm like, oh, I really got to put some haikus in there. Just throw some in there. Why not? And no, but mostly freestyle. I mean, I do like to delve into the more traditional kind of sense kind of stuff because that is important too. It's important to acknowledge all different types. But definitely freestyle is my or free verse or whatever. I more classify it as the subconscious writing.
Subconscious writing.
Because my writing to me really comes from the subconscious,
Okay.
and it's very strange because sometimes a line just might pop up in my head and it
Mhm.
sounds good and it just rhythmically sounds good and the words just look good together. And that's kind of how I get that inspiration from, but it's all very subconscious
Mhm.
writing.
I can agree with that. I've had that same phenomenon where you wake up in the middle of the night and there's a word running through your head or a verse running through your head, and you're like, okay, we're gonna write that down and we're gonna look at it later when we're awake.
No, exactly. And the we're talking about art forms, when it comes to poetry, music, painting, you're a sculptor, what have you.
Hmm.
They're all more or less the same. I hate to break it to you, but they're all more or less the same. People may not want to admit it, but it's all very it's all one and the same thing. You know, that expression of expressing yourself, whether that be through a painting, poetry, or music, that all comes in varying degrees, but it's all one and the same thing. So I think that's very important to see it that way as well. Yeah.
Now, your bio did mention that you were into visual art as well. Do you paint or is it more sculpture?
So here's the thing. Even though I do mention about sculpting and painting, I am not very talented in that aspect. But if you do go on my Instagram page, if you go on my Facebook page, you go on my Twitter, I'm all over the spectrum. All right. And you're definitely going to see a lot of artwork that is connected to the poetry. Now, that doesn't mean that the artwork has a certain connection to the poetry. It might just mean that I picked a snippet of a poem and there's a piece of artwork that I just really like and I really think it should pair up together, even though it may not seem like it should pair up, but that's
Hmm.
the beauty of it. Two unlikely pairings coming together and almost making a harmony. So a lot of the artwork I do make is through Photoshop. I do like to delve in, Photoshop and different things like that.
Right.
I feel like a lot of my artwork, that could be said by a lot of different people is very psychedelic. Again, coming from that influence of the 60s and the Beat Generation. But again, it's multifaceted. It's something that you, the reader, or you, the viewer of the art, can interpret. It's very much like when you go to a museum and you see uh, I can't think of the artist right now. Oh, like a Jackson Pollock or something like that.
Okay.
You fit to see what you think it is, because it's very broad spectrum in that sense, but it's like you have to kind of interpret it. So very important that, you know.
It's the audience's job to make sense from the chaos.
Yeah, exactly. It's their sense to like kind of sift through the chaos and find peace within the art and the poetry,
Hmm.
for sure. Yeah.
I like that a lot, and I can agree with that 100%. So on
And
that,
and and one last oh, no, sorry, one last thing
yeah.
about that. Um, as humans, we are very used to traditions and we're very used to doing daily things the same. You
Hmm.
wake up, you do this, you go to work, you go to bed, whatever. And people are very afraid of the unfamiliar, which is also something that I try to portray in the book as well. Try to not be afraid of the unfamiliar.
Hmm.
There's a line in there that might make you feel a little like, oh, what's he trying to say here? Or it might be a little dark, or it might be something, whatever. There's no reason to shoot it down. Just try to accept it, and see what it is at face value for sure. But I cut you off. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no, you're fine. That's a good piece of advice, though, honestly, because you can read something and it might disturb you, it might not set with you well, but then the more you think about it, the more you can be like, okay, well, maybe he was onto something here.
Exactly, correct. Yeah,
So I agree that we should. And there's a quote floating around, and I forget who said it, but it's art should disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed, I believe
I
is the
like
quote.
that.
And I feel that on a very base level, because art in any capacity, be it visual, be it verbal, be it poetry, music, it should make you feel something
Oh,
personally.
for sure.
Because if it doesn't make you feel something, then what's the point of it?
Exactly. No, and that's the beauty of it. There's a different spectrums of emotions in there. It's I almost equate it to something like an orchestra where it's not this one beat line kind of song.
Mm-hmm.
There's different textures and feelings in there. So it's no, definitely I agree 100%.
Yep, I agree. It's really good. So, but what I was going to say before we got off on that lovely tangent was, I would like to hear some of your poems, because you have explained yourself a little bit and given your insights. And now, if you have some that you would like to share with us, I think we would really enjoy reading or listening to some of your work.
Yeah, sure. I'd be more than happy to. So, again, the book right here.
Hmm?
So
Called
I
Have
am
Nine
going,
Lives.
yes, have nine lives, correct. I am going to read you the first poem that spawned this whole mission, this whole
Okay.
experience, which was spawned from the Dylan song, and it's titled "Line Up the Animals." And again, when I was first learning, trying to try to form this style, I figured like, okay, this is where there's a little bit of meaning in here. But again, it's something that you have to interpret yourself. And I thought to myself, what are three things or three places that I find very important in my life that have
Hmm.
been so seminal in my life? So I picked New York for obvious reasons because I was born
Right.
there. New Jersey because I have family there, and Las Vegas because I've been there time and time again due to trade shows, my family's business. We've been there many a times. So I figure pick those three and see what you can do with that. So I'm going to read it. So line up the animals. So some things never change. A dusty throat, the theater stage, sits numb in New York City, looking glum, sitting on the stoop, you silly. Billy, open jackets are chilly. In New York City, sit and stay, man, a new command. The heads come in threes. Chewing gum in New York City, what a pity. A helicopter light shines on the straw where a rolling castle falls, washed away, turning gray in New York City. You've been here once before, the pastry shop, the bloody floor, sits cocky in New Jersey, looking tasty. Aren't you a little young? It's a sad, silly Billy similar in New Jersey. Blue in the face, red hands every chance, occurring before noon. Feeling lazy in New Jersey, feeling worthy, but I'll never say I do in New Jersey. Somehow this feels right the open arms, the studded sides. Sits famous in Las Vegas, feeling aimless. Aren't you all washed up? Even though it's dry in Las Vegas, a black blotch, you got caught. You know very little of my life. Stories painted in certain hues. It amuses you. You got the shock value. Feeling nameless in Las Vegas, a working waitress. When lights in total, manic depression hits the hair, it isn't fair when it doesn't shine on yours in Las Vegas.
Oh, I like that. You definitely paint a clear picture of each of these locations.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, that was definitely attempt at that for sure.
Mhm. And I've been to Vegas, so like I could see or I could picture what you were describing there.
Right. And I'm not going to try and age myself, but I was there during when there was still the tiniest bit of mafia influence, in
Oh,
Vegas.
all right.
And it's not like what you see nowadays where it's a big party place. It's very different from when I used to go when I was very young, but that's where that kind of old school mentality comes from in the poetry.
Hmm.
Let's see. You want to read another one?
Sure, we have time for a couple
Uh,
more.
Okay. I'm gonna read. Okay, this one. Let me get to the page first. Okay, here we go. So this one is kind of a rarity in the book. Now, this one is actually does have a meaning to the poetry, but it still is in that same style, but there's more of a meaning to it. The title of the poem is "Stick with Me, Lazaro," and if you will notice in the book that this book is dedicated to Jack Lazaro, who was my great grandfather. And
Okay.
it all started out one day where, I was looking at family photos with my family, extended family, and they were explaining to me who Jack Lazaro was. And I was very, again, it's a psychic thing, very strange, but I was very in tune and very connected with this guy because he's been through many trials and tribulations. And I'm like, I got to write a poem about this guy. There's no
Hmm.
way I can't write a poem about this guy. So the title's called "Stick with Me, Lazaro," and it's almost in a way it shows a timeline of his life with the poetry. But so it starts out as you're a man with a dream in your childhood years, scissored out, throwing pennies. All that glitters isn't gold, blasting badges on familiar walls, with no part in the plot. The start of this dance creates a river of tears. Expired like a flower, failed health takes the maker, and we weep taking the shine off of yourself, a monster of the night with shards in your dreams. Must the child be arrested, praying to the azure chrome skies of the one true Savior, throwing newspaper prints at the graveyard bones, scrambled, en route, separate piles of ashes, shining light through the sky, through the popcorn raindrops, keeps the kids, borrow them only for the night. Moved to the East Coast to marry my true bride, a haunting ghost, to their plastic displays, spinning wheels, missing pages, walking through each other's eyes, paintbrush less between the lines. Little did we know that we were blood on the run. Heaves a loss, a dedicated depression, shows death doesn't wait, wearing thorns, steals the form of a three-dimensional scheme. The ravine breaks for parents of two. The injections of nighttime slashings, struggled, bludgeoned, looking ancient as usual, comforting an old-fashioned flame. Time chips at the saw and the sand timer's sand starts to drain. Daughter's husband dies and Gracie's gone insane. Whatever happens to me, kid, I'll always be with you. And those last two lines, whatever happens to me, kid, I'll always be with you, was told by my family that that was one of the last words that Jack Lazaro did say to my grandmother and her sister, who actually had a very rare mental disorder. that they're still trying to find a cure for. Actually, it's very, very rare, and it came to the point where she wasn't. This was back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. They didn't really exactly have the means
Right.
or the medicine for that, so she eventually, did. Her mind basically deteriorated in a sense, and he had to go through that. He loved his family dearly, but he had to go through that. He had just had to go through a lot of trials and tribulations in life just to get where he was. And he was just a simple man. He was a carpenter at one point, and he did many different jobs. And he just wanted to have a simple family man life, you know. But I think that's what I respect about him. It's that, again, the poetry, you know, if you want to say for a lack of a better term, the poetry is very eclectic. It's very, again, what we were saying earlier, it's uh, very different meanings. But then sometimes you can find the beauty in the simplicity, but it
Hmm.
really depends on the subject. You can find the beauty in the simplicity of that by just seeing a man who is so simple, who loves his family, and it's something that can also touch the hearts of people because they can relate to it. And I definitely felt like, to keep the rhythm of the book, I felt like, okay, this one's going to be a little different because I really want to show people what he's like. But I do want to keep it in that same fashion, that same light from that first poem style. But I definitely felt it was very important not only to dedicate the book to him, but to, definitely write a poem about him. It just really struck me in a different way, you know.
Right. And it's not all poetry has to be vague. Like, from what it sounded like, that is a biography in the way that you would write a biography, which is through poetry.
Exactly. Right, right. And it's, definitely, and I'm very happy about it. I'm very proud of it because that's in the style. There was two motives to writing the poem. It was in my style,
Hmm.
and but it was more like you said about a biography in a way, and I want people to know what he had to go through. So it's very special poem, as you can tell.
Yes, it was beautiful. Both of them were amazing. And unfortunately, we are running out of time, but thank you so much for coming on and sharing this with us, sharing your work and your words.
Oh, it was my dearest pleasure. I thank you so much for having me on here. It was a real pleasure getting to share my book, definitely my thoughts on writing and all those good stuff. So it's definitely a pleasure.
Where can people find your book?
So right now I am in the process of working on the website. As you can tell, everything is coming to fruition. So
Okay.
I'm working on the website, working on the book, working on the music. But you can definitely, like I said, I'm all over social media. You can find me on Instagram at official Tristan Beauty Gig. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, if you have any.
Mhm.
Um, really anywhere. But I also have an Etsy shop, Bowery Books and Arts, where I do sell little framed art pieces of my artwork that is on the social media, but I put like little poetry in there. So
Okay.
if anybody's interested in that, but definitely a lot of social media for sure. You can reach out to me.
Okay, absolutely. And I
Yeah,
will include those links in the show notes for anyone who's interested in finding you elsewhere.
very cool. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Present Poetry Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, feel free to like us, leave a review, or share us on social media. If you are a poet or you know someone who is, we would love to hear from you. You can reach out to us or submit your work through our website, which is www.present-poetry.com. Again, that is www.present-poetry.com. We can't wait to hear from you.